office outside Atlanta. The search comes amid ongoing scrutiny of Fulton County's handling of the 2020 presidential election. President Trump has long argued that election improprieties in Georgia contributed to his loss in the state. Last month, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against Fulton County, seeking access to voting records from the 2020 election. County officials had previously said records were under seal and could not be released without a court order. The lawsuit stems from a July resolution passed by Georgia's state election board, which called on the state attorney general to ensure compliance with voting transparency requirements. The FBI executed a search warrant at the Fulton County Elections Office not far from Atlanta. Joining us to discuss is political strategist Gerard Filitti, senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. Gerard, good afternoon. Can you just first off speak to the gravity of the situation of a raid of an election facility?
It tells you how serious this is when a judge, a federal judge, has signed off on a warrant, meaning that there's probable cause to believe a crime has been committed in order to execute this search. And it's not just a normal search. This is a raid. There is a concern implicitly here that if the raid were not carried out when it was, records might be lost or destroyed or otherwise be made unavailable. So this speaks to the seriousness of this situation, and it tells you that the Justice Department's investigation is really progressing smoothly and quickly.
So can you go a bit deeper into that? What exactly do you need to show or convince the judge of in order to get a federal search warrant in this context?
Well, you need to specify what you're looking for, how it connects to your investigation, and more importantly, that there is a reasonable basis to believe that some crime has actually been committed. So the FBI has to show those things to a federal judge, to a magistrate judge, in order to get a warrant. Now, warrants are not automatic. We may think that they are, but judges do look carefully to see if that burden is met. So this means that the FBI convinced the federal judge that the information they had and the case that they're pursuing is serious enough to warrant this.
So why engage in a raid specifically rather than perhaps other options like issuing a subpoena or getting documents some other way?
When you have a raid, you have the concern that if you simply ask for records, they will be destroyed. Someone will alter them. Someone will make sure that they're not found, not available. So the raid element is the element of surprise. It's the maximum chance that you have of obtaining documents or other evidence without giving people a heads up that they have an opportunity to destroy or tamper with it. And again, when we're talking about voter fraud, when we're talking about allegations of the integrity of our electoral system, you want to take this seriously, and you don't want to give people an opportunity to hide the evidence.
So speaking of documents, some of them include, ballots, tabulator tapes from the scanners used to tally the ballots, electronic ballot images, voter rolls. What could evidence of wrongdoing look like in this case?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I think we will see more as time progresses. But I think part of this will be an audit by the FBI to see whether these documents are original, whether they are presumed to be original from election night, from the voters themselves, or whether there is any indication that there was tampering with them, whether some were not counted or some were counted in different ways. So looking at these actual ballots and comparing them to voter rolls to make sure that there's a match between the number of ballots and the number of people who are eligible to and actually did vote, these are things that the FBI is going to be looking at.
So speaking of tampering, a senator raised concerns regarding chain of custody to ensure the documents are not subject to modification. So what are the mechanisms in place to actually protect chain of custody?
Well, by the FBI, the chain of custody is pretty simple. You have to sworn agents who are tracking every time that evidence is moved, looked at, taken anywhere, anything is done with it. So you have a log. Before it's in the hands of the FBI, that's the question. Different counties, different electoral boards have different proceedings. So it's not clear what Fulton County's process was, but usually when you have chain of evidence, even for something before it gets to a federal investigation, you do need that log of who had possession of them, what they were used for, what happened to them, keeping track of it.
So Gerard, some have raised concerns about election integrity being at risk due to this raid. But people have had big concerns as well about election fraud since at least 2020. Is investigating potential fraud in our elections the responsibility of local, state, and federal government?
Well, it has to be, because when you're looking at the integrity of elections, this is something that falls within the purview of the federal government. That's why the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was reportedly on the scene, because the DNI, that office of the federal government, is responsible for maintaining voter integrity, for maintaining electoral integrity, to make sure that there's no tampering, especially by foreign actors. So this is something that the federal government takes seriously, as well as state and local officials. The problem is that there is an inconsistency between states. There's no uniform way that ballots and voting systems are handled. And because of that, you do need local officials to be more involved in maintaining the safety and security of this process.
So if fraud is found, people are charged. Do you expect those findings to change the way the public and government approach elections going forward? And what does it mean for the 2020 election?
Well, I think this calls into account the growing pressure on many elected officials by the public to maintain election integrity, to make sure that people who are voting are actually eligible to vote, that there is some form of ID requirement when voting, that the mechanisms for voting by absentee or remote ballot are secure and are impervious to being tampered with. And regardless of the outcome of this particular investigation, I think that we will see a trend towards having more measures to safeguard the integrity of elections and to make sure that it truly is one person, one vote, and that this is all counted. As for the 2020 election, that's settled. I mean, there's nothing that's going to change there. If anything, we might have a different number, a different result. But the fact is that Joe Biden was president, and now it's Donald Trump.
Right, understood. And just real quick, how long do you think this investigation could last before we get some kind of information on what they found?
I think that the fact that they sought a warrant and executed a raid means that they have certain individuals identified, and we may not know who they are yet, but they have identified individuals who they are concerned might tamper with the evidence. So I think this investigation is proceeding very quickly, and it will be a matter of weeks, if not a few months, before we have more details and possibly charges.
All right, Gerard, great analysis as always. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Border Czar Tom Homan says number of immigration enforcement officers in Minnesota will be reduced. That's with cooperation